Sanaa had always been the kind of woman who worked quietly, blending into the rhythm of office life without drawing much attention. At 28, she carried herself with a calm professionalism that made her dependable, though seldom noticed. Her colleagues respected her diligence, but it was her boss, Arman, who seemed to see beyond the surface. Home life was different. Sanaa lived with her husband, Adil, in a small apartment not far from the city center. Adil was kind in a distant way, offering financial stability but little else. His long hours and constant distractions left her evenings hollow. Their conversations had grown mechanical, reduced to polite exchanges about bills, groceries, or relatives. When Sanaa tried to speak of her day, Adil often responded with a distracted nod, his eyes glued to his phone. Over time, the silence between them became heavier than words could carry. The contrast struck her most sharply during office hours. Arman, her boss, was not just attentive. He was observant. He remembered the little things, the brand of tea she preferred, the way she tapped her pen when lost in thought, the faint tremor in her voice when deadlines loomed. When he asked how she was doing, it didn't feel like small talk. It felt like someone had genuinely noticed her. It began innocently, or so she told herself. Compliment here, an encouraging smile there. Arman's words carried a warmth that Adil's rarely did anymore. When he praised her for completing a report ahead of schedule, his tone held something beyond professional courtesy. It was admiration. She caught herself replaying those words later at night, long after Adil had fallen asleep beside her. The office environment, too, seemed to conspire in their closeness. Late evenings at work were common during quarterly reviews, and Sanaa often found herself among the last few still at her desk. Arman, too, stayed late, his door slightly ajar, the glow of his lamp casting elongated shadows across the hall. Sometimes he would step out, offering her coffee from the machine, his smile a subtle reassurance that she wasn't alone in her effort. One evening, as she stretched her arms after hours of typing, Arman appeared beside her desk. "You should take a break," he said gently, sliding a cup of tea in front of her. "You've been at this for too long." Sanaa felt a flicker of warmth. Adil hadn't made her tea in months, not since their early days of marriage when small gestures had seemed effortless. She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. It was nothing, she told herself, just courtesy. Yet the sensation lingered longer than she cared to admit. Her guilt began quietly, like a shadow that stretched each day. She reminded herself that Arman was her superior, that she was married, that this attention, whatever it was dangerous. And yet she didn't pull away. Instead, she found herself drawn deeper. She looked forward to meetings where she could hear his voice, to mornings when his greeting felt warmer than the chill of dawn at home. Adil, for his part, noticed little. He assumed Sanaa's late nights were part of her dedication to work, and he never questioned her tired smile when she returned home. His trust, rather than comforting her, made the growing secret in her heart feel heavier. Each time she lied about staying late for reports, she wondered if her voice sounded different, if her eyes betrayed her. Sanaa began dressing with more care, paying attention to details she had once ignored. A touch of perfume, a carefully chosen shade of lipstick, subtle changes meant to look professional but which, deep down, she knew were for Arman. The realization unsettled her. She told herself it was harmless, just a phase, just admiration. Yet in quiet moments, she acknowledged a truth she could not voice. She wanted to feel desired, and Arman had unknowingly awakened that need. The first undeniable moment arrived on a Friday evening. Most of the staff had left early, eager for the weekend, but Sanaa stayed behind to finish a presentation. Arman walked by, stopping at her desk. "You really don't have to stay this late," he said, his voice lower than usual, tinged with something softer. She smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his for a second longer than necessary. In that fleeting silence, something unspoken passed between them, an awareness neither dared to name. That night, as Sanaa packed her files and turned off her computer, she realized her heart was racing. Not because of the workload, not because of deadlines, but because she was already anticipating Monday. For the first time in years, she wasn't dreading going home. She was longing to return to work. The weeks that followed blurred into a pattern Sanaa could not ignore. What had once been casual exchanges between her and Arman grew into conversations laced with familiarity, marked by an intimacy that felt far removed from the fluorescent-lit corridors of the office. Began with small moments. A glance held too long during a meeting. A smile that carried more meaning than a simple acknowledgement. When Arman leaned over to review her notes, the nearness of his voice sent shivers she could not rationalize. She told herself it was nothing, yet her heart betrayed her, skipping like a guilty secret with every interaction. Their bond deepened during late evenings. One particular night, when the office had long emptied, Arman invited her into his cabin to review a presentation. He poured them both coffee, but the discussion drifted swiftly away from spreadsheets and graphs. He spoke of his childhood, his ambitions, and even moments of loneliness. To her surprise, he was candid, vulnerable in a way she had never imagined. His honesty disarmed her, dissolving the invisible line she had tried to maintain. Sanaa, too, found herself confessing things she had kept buried. She spoke of Adil, not unkindly, but with the quiet ache of neglect. She admitted how unseen she felt, how her efforts at home often went unnoticed. Arman listened without interruption, his gaze steady, his silence heavy with understanding. When she finished, he said softly, "You deserve more than that." The words echoed in her mind long after she had returned home. Guilt gnawed at her, but so did desire. She started anticipating their encounters, how his presence filled a room, how his laughter lightened the air, how his encouragement seemed tailored only for her. At home, Adil remained distant, asking no questions, giving her no reason to explain the newfound light in her eyes. The contrast made her longing sharper, the pull toward Arman nearly irresistible. The first boundary crossed was almost imperceptible. One late evening, as Sanaa stood by the printer, Arman walked past and brushed her arm gently, almost as though by accident. But she felt the intention in the gesture, the spark of something more. Her breath caught, and when she looked up, his eyes held hers for a fraction too long. Neither spoke, yet the silence carried a weight words could not match. Soon dinners replaced coffee. Under the guise of work discussions, they met at quiet restaurants where dim lights and soft music offered cover for their stolen hours. Sanaa laughed more in those evenings than she had in years. She found herself sharing stories she had never voiced to anyone. Her voice animated, her eyes bright. Arman, attentive as always, seemed to absorb every word. But with every meeting came a heavier sense of betrayal. Each time she glanced at her phone to check for messages from Adil, her chest tightened. There were rarely any messages waiting. His absence should have freed her from guilt, yet it only made it worse. She was acutely aware of the double life she was cultivating, one built on thrill and secrecy, the other on routine and neglect. The inevitable moment came one rainy evening. They had stayed late again, reviewing documents for an upcoming client pitch. The sound of thunder rolled outside, the office nearly deserted, the world beyond the glass blurred by sheets of rain. Sanaa rose to leave, only to find the storm had trapped her. Arman offered to drive her home, but when they reached the parking lot, neither moved to open the car door. The silence stretched, charged with unspoken tension. Arman finally broke it, his voice low. "Sanaa, tell me you don't feel this too." Her reply trembled on her lips, but the truth betrayed her restraint. "I do." In that instant, the line they had tiptoed around for months dissolved. His hand reached for hers, and though she hesitated for the briefest moment, she did not pull away. The kiss that followed was soft yet fierce, the culmination of every glance, every brush of fingertips, every unspoken confession. When they parted, Sanaa's heart pounded in her chest. She knew the gravity of what had just happened, the betrayal it carried, the danger it invited. And yet, as she leaned back in her seat, breathless and trembling, she also knew there would be no turning back. That night, as she lay awake beside Adil, guilt pressed against her like a heavy blanket. Still, when her phone buzzed with a simple goodnight message from Arman, she couldn't stop herself from smiling. For the first time, she wasn't only living two lives. She was choosing one over the other. The affair had begun as a flicker, a hidden warmth in the monotony of Sanaa's days, but by the third month, it had become a fire she could neither contain nor extinguish. Every text from Arman quickened her pulse. Every excuse she gave Adil deepened the shadows of her guilt. Yet, the thrill of secrecy pulled her further, the danger itself becoming part of the intoxication. But no double life remained seamless forever. Adil was not a suspicious man, but he was not blind. He noticed how Sanaa's laughter had returned, though not in their shared moments. He noticed her sudden habit of checking her phone in another room, the faint perfume that lingered on her even when she claimed to have worked late. His questions were tentative at first. "Is everything okay at work?" But when her answers grew clipped and defensive, his silence turned into watchfulness. For Sanaa, guilt became a constant companion. She found herself rehearsing lies before walking through the apartment door, perfecting her smile so it would not tremble. Nights beside Adil grew unbearable. The weight of his trust pressed against her like an accusation. And yet, when Arman's messages arrived, "I miss you tomorrow, same place," her resolve crumbled. The pull of feeling desired drowned out the whispers of conscience. Arman, too, had begun to change. What had started as stolen glances and secret meetings soon transformed into demands for more time, more closeness. "We can't keep sneaking around like this," he confessed one evening as they sat in his car. "Don't you ever think about, what if this could be real?" His tone was both hopeful and insistent. The suggestion rattled Sanaa. She had never imagined a life beyond the affair. For her, Arman was a refuge, a hidden escape from the loneliness of her marriage. But to consider a future, one that required destroying the life she already had, was a thought that left her trembling. Her turmoil reached a breaking point one Saturday morning. She was preparing breakfast when Adil walked into the kitchen, phone in hand, his face pale. "Who is he, Sanaa?" Her breath caught. The message on her screen had betrayed her. Arman's name glowing in bold letters. His words unmistakable. "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you." Sanaa froze, unable to speak. Adil's voice wavered between anger and heartbreak. "I trusted you. All this time I trusted you." The confrontation unraveled her. She tried to explain, her words tumbling out in fragments. How lonely she had felt, how unseen, how Arman had filled a void she could no longer deny. But Adil's eyes, once gentle, were now clouded with disbelief. "So you chose him over us?" he asked quietly, his voice breaking. In that moment, Sanaa realized there was no defense strong enough, no justification that could erase the betrayal. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Adil left the apartment, slamming the door behind him, and the sound reverberated through her chest like a final verdict. The days after blurred together. Arman reached out constantly, urging her to lean on him, but Sanaa felt no solace. The affair that once made her feel alive now carried the bitter taste of ruin. She could not ignore the image of Adil's eyes, shattered, betrayed, and she could not imagine what pieces of herself remained intact after the truth had surfaced. In Arman's company, she felt restless. His touch, once electric, now reminded her of the wreckage she had left behind. What had seemed thrilling now felt suffocating, and the weight of consequence hung between them like a curtain that could not be drawn aside. One evening, she told him what she had been rehearsing for weeks. "Arman, I can't do this anymore." He looked at her with disbelief. "After everything, you can't just walk away." But she did. Not because the feelings weren't real, but because they were too costly. Love, she realized, meant nothing if it was built on betrayal. Alone in her apartment, the silence pressed against her once more, but it was no longer the silence of neglect. It was the silence of loss. Sanaa understood then that infidelity does not end with passion. It ends with ruins that linger long after the fire has burned out. Her story had begun with a hunger for attention, for recognition, for love. It ended with a truth she would carry forever. Some voids cannot be filled by crossing forbidden lines. They only deepen, leaving scars where desire once promised salvation.